Wonderful. Cool. Okay, well, we shall start then. So for those of you that weren't around for the last video, that is now live on my YouTube. It will be live on Luciana's soon, so you'll be able to watch the previous video on any platform. It is up on my IGTV as well. In that video, we just did a big introduction to each other and started talking about occult herbalism. So just to kick off, we're going to try and keep the introductions pretty small. So let me go first. Hello, everyone. I am Paul. I'm the witch behind Modern Witchery on Instagram and Let's Talk Tarot on YouTube. I became involved in the local pagan scene at a pretty young age, around about the age of 14, and later trained in Wicca. And then I ran and taught my own coven for a number of years and then helped out others. I'm very passionate about plants, which is why we're doing this. And I taught occult herbalism and plant alchemy in London for a number of years. I also ran a company called recreating historical spiritual products and recipes from old texts. I'm a trained psychotherapist and I hold a university degree in clinical hypnosis, go figure. You can find me on Instagram on Modern Witchery. You can also find me on YouTube on Let's Talk Tarot, and anyone that would like a tarot card reading, just drop me a message on here. Over to you.
Over to me here. Well, welcome everybody who's listening to this session that we have today. My name is Luciana Berchi. I've been studying yoga, Ayurveda, Reiki, and everything esoteric, and I'm the alchemist behind Luciana Berchi Holistic. What I do is holistic health and well-being, and I work with esoteric and alchemy, plant alchemy. And I do personalized sessions to try to evoke this process of transformation that the alchemy teaches us and that we are trying to talk to you about in these lives. I also teach group alchemy courses, and currently those are my main offerings. And I've been doing this since 2014, so that's 6 years now. Very happy to start today sharing a little bit more of this sessions that we decided to call Occult Herbalism.
Yes, and we are doing, tonight we're talking about the Greek elements, the 4 elements of Greek philosophy and how they pertain to plants and occult plant usage. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah, and today last session we told you that today maybe you want to take some notes. So if you have a notebook or something and you want to know a little bit more about the elements and how to find them in herbs and how do they act in our bodies, then it will be nice for you to bring a notebook. Also, we're open for you to ask questions here on the live. We will read them and we will try to mix them in the middle of the conversation. Paul and I are famous for talking a lot, so we will try to read your questions and answers. So feel free to be curious and to ask us anything you need.
Yeah, we are aiming for about 40 minutes tonight. We will answer, as Luciana said, questions as we go, just so that we know how much time we've got. Last time we overspun by about 10 minutes of the hour. Yeah. We are notorious for having a good chat.
Exactly.
So let us stick to it. So we are talking about the 4 Greek elements tonight and linking them back to plants. So I think you had something that you wanted to read, Luciana.
Yes, I was actually getting my computer a little bit closer to read this to you, because we're going to read this little poem. I will say, because it's written like a poem. This is the Emerald Tablet that was written. I really don't know. People don't know when this is dated, but it was discovered that it is said that it was handed over by Hermes, Chief Magistas, and it's the foundation for all the alchemical operations. and the alchemical goal of finding that philosopher's stone that is, I will say, it's illumination, right? It's really, that's what it's about. So I'm going to share with you a little passage, that contains a lot of information, but we thought it was pertinent for today's session. So the Emerald Tablet goes like this. "'Tis true, without lying, certain and most true, that which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracles of only one thing. And as all things have been and arose from one by the meditation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. The sun is its father, the moon its mother, the wind hath carried it in its belly, the earth is its nurse. The father of all perfection in the whole world is here. Its force or power is entire if it be converted into earth. Separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, sweetly and with great industry. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and again it descends to the earth and receives the force of things superior and inferior. By these means you shall have the glory of the whole world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from you. Its force is above all force, for it vanishes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. So was the world created. From these are and do come admirable adaptations, whereof the means or process is here in this. Hence I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. That which I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended."
Lovely.
It's written in Old English, so it was very interesting. I was trying to translate some things.
Yeah, and it's one of those that, I mean, the Emerald Tablet is something that pretty much most occultists or alchemists or esotericists will know, because it's got so many of those key principles in, like as above, so below, and more importantly for this session, the elements, with the wind and the earth being in the body.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's a pretty good one to start off with. Hermes Trismegistus, Hermetic philosophy, was kind of thought of being between around with the 1st century CE and the 3rd century CE. That's kind of when the Hermes Trismegistus texts were kind of created, or the Hermetic corpus, which they were. Hermes Trismegistus had a bit of a weird history. Like in the kind of Renaissance period, they thought that Hermes Trismegistus was before Moses, so they kind of saw him as like this big original source of information. But actually they were kind of written later as part of the kind of Gnosticism that kind of happened later on after Christianity, as a kind of aside to Christianity. So it's actually a pretty good start there.
Actually some people say that this Hermes was actually an Egyptian god. Some people say that he was not exactly a god, but one of the ancient humans, the previous, the human race that was before us, and that held all this knowledge, and that all the legends say that that's how their civilization disappeared, right? He was able to hand this over to the ancient Egypt.
Yeah, and he's seen like nowadays in kind of modern scholarship, he's seen as kind of a blending of two gods. So you're right in terms of the Egyptian god, like the Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing, blended with Hermes, which is the kind of the Mercury thing. I know eventually we're going to talk about Mercury in terms of planetary, but this is kind of where that's based on. Yeah. So two very thinky, very quick, kind of very knowledgey and philosophy based.
Communication of information too about, right?
Yeah, and this is like the culmination of Egyptian philosophy, which we're going to talk about today. Is, you know, by the time we got to the 1st and 3rd centuries, we're talking about the kind of melting pot of Alexandria. So we're talking about the Greek ideas being married with the Arabic ideas and married with the kind of Egyptian ideas into this kind of interesting quagmire of magic. You know, the Greek magical texts of Egypt are quite well known, and then you've got this corpus hermeticum. So I was going to match your quote with one of my own from the same from the Hermetic corpus. So this is kind of from those same texts that were translated from Greek by Ficino. So I have: of living things, my son, some are made friends with fire, some with water, some with air, and some with earth, and some with 2 or 3 of these things, and some with all. And on the contrary, again, some are made enemies of fire, and some of water, and some of earth, and some of air, and some of 2 of them, and some of 3, and some of all. And it's a very long, wordy way of saying that everything associates back to these 4 elements, that some things are friends with them, they cooperate well with certain elements, and some things do not work well with certain elements. And therefore we've got these, what we later call like antipathies and sympathies, which we will talk much later on, but basically at this level, we're talking about attributions and correspondences. So we're talking about why cucumber should be seen as water, or why name a plant like ginger is of fire and patchouli is of earth. Right. So we're getting that very, very early start of that elemental theory that is derived from the Greeks, derived from the understanding of the philosophers, basically.
Which is it's a really good start for herbalism, right? To start linking our plants with the different elements.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. This, like I said, like with the Greek philosophers, they kind of formulated the idea of these 4 elements being, you know, otherworldly and influencing our world from beyond. But later on, we start attributing all plants to these 4 elements, as we both know, and then you end up with basically the core of medicine that lasted up until the 1700s, 1800s. Galenic medicine was based on these 4 elements, and I'll mention the humours later, but we will be talking about that more on the 5th session on elements in the body. But that humoral theory stayed around for a very long time, so influenced an awful lot of alchemy for you, medicine for doctors that are looking at the history of medicine, and even herbalists that are kind of halfway between.
Herbalism, yeah.
So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff. So shall we look at what the 4 elements are?
Yes, let's start with there.
Cool. Okay, so the 4 elements are earth, air, fire, and water. 2 of those were seen as primary.
Parenthesis, this is talking about the Greek philosophy, because then there are other philosophies that will incorporate more elements, and we'll be talking about those too in the future.
Good correction. Yeah, we will be talking about alchemical elements, and these are not to be confused with it. These are the Greek philosophical elements.
Right, and then the ones that come from Ayurveda and from Chinese medicine too, which come from also a different pattern. So we are talking about Western, the birth of Western medicine in here, sort of.
Exactly. Yeah, she knows. It's about that. Yeah, Greek medical stuff. So we've got these 4 things: earth, air, fire, water. The primary, the 2 that were original, the 2 first elements, were water and fire. So they are represented by a simple triangle, upright triangle for fire, and upside down triangle pointing downwards for water. And the way that people tend to remember it is that fire ascends, it directs up, which is why it's pointing up, and water descends, it goes to the lowest point, which is why it's pointing down. So those were the kind of two original elements, and we see that a little bit influencing some Gnostic ideas. So we see that kind of in The Origin of the World, in the Gospel of John, where it kind of says, and the Spirit moved upon the waters. The fire moved along the waters and then began creation.
Exactly. So we call these two elements originating, because if you see the symbolism, you can tell that with the combination of these two elements, so the up looking triangle and the downward looking triangle, when you combine them, you get this 6-point star, which is...
Exactly. Yeah. Actually, I might flick you over to my desktop. Let me just do that. Oh, yeah. There you go.
There you go. That is a perfect...
so sorry
image.
About the glare.
Oh, no, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I can see it.
So we kind of have fire here on the top.
Yeah.
It's kind of merging below with the water to create this 6-pointed star, as you were talking about, the Seal of Solomon or the Jewish Star of David. And this is where the other two elements jump out from. So we get here, one that's pointing down, being heavier, is earth, and one that's pointing up, moving upwards, is air. And where did these lines come from that are crossing? Well, they come from the opposite element. So here we've got the water triangle with the bottom bar of fire, and here we've got the fire triangle with the bottom bar of water.
Exactly. So that symbolism is explaining us how the primordial elements combined form the other two elements in the Western view of elements, and that is why it's so connected with this creation theory, because the first thing was the water. The first thing was the primordial water that many currents and many ancient traditions talk about, the primordial waters, which is the feminine, the female principle, the chaos, like the water represents that primordial chaos. And then it comes the fire, which is a sort of seminal, uses seminal, like a seed element that comes and brings order into that chaos. And from that combination, the world is created. Like this is the tale of how all things were created. And it's also kind of mentioned in a symbolic way in the Emerald tablet that I read at the beginning.
Yeah. But I think you also made a good point there about the genders of them. So anything that points upwards is seen as kind of masculine or active elements, so the fire and the air. And then the feminine or passive elements is water and earth, down pointing. So we are using a very slightly outmoded gender binary here of male and female. Yeah. And I try to kind of divorce myself from gender politics and just see these as energies, and it's just ways of describing energies that don't actually have a gender. Exactly. For those of you that kind of, go, oh, that's a bit binary. It's just solely
I've heard people
philosophy.
Talk about that. Why put in a gender to them? I think it's just a way to understand them and codify them. But we definitely can talk about active and receptive sort of energy. Yeah. Obviously, in people, is absolutely a female can be absolutely active, and a male can be absolutely receptive. So that it has nothing to do with personality or gender in real. But it's true. It's better to use the words active and passive, or not even passive, because the chaos is not passive, I will say.
Yeah, I like receptive. I like it. Yeah, I like the way you're using receptive there. I think that's accurate. So there is two ways to codify these elements based on whether they are active, moving forth, doing things, or receptive, passively allowing things to happen. So think passive pools of water reflecting what's on them. Earth waiting for things to move across.
I think these concepts are fundamental to understand elements, because this is so important too. Using the words chaos and order is also very interesting. When we know that water and chaos contains all living things, indifferentiated, like they are all the same, they're all put together, but there's that water was all the life, so it contains all the information for life, but it's not separated, it's all together, so it's all one thing. So when it comes, when order comes, when that fire comes to this water, it starts sort of breaking it into the different things that exist. And I think that's fantastic, because that's the order that comes and says, okay, so this is a pencil, this has a shape, this is not part of my hand anymore, it's something separated. So both principles have a lot of potential, and it's beautiful to sort of see what parts of ourselves are water, what parts of ourselves are fire, so we can integrate them.
And that links me perfectly to the next comment that I wanted to make, was that the idea of the elements is kind of very Greek. It's about the purity of these elements don't exist in the real world. They exist in like the astral plane, or the world of forms, if you're kind of being more accurate to the philosophy. In real life, we don't get pure elements. We don't get fire. And it's one of the things that I have to continually say to kind of like witchy students or in covens, like
what do you
when
mean?
They see
I have fire.
exactly, like they put a candle and they go, that's fire. It's like, well, it's not, it represents it, but that candle is made out of every single part of the four elements. It's, you know, we've got a physical thing, so it's got earth, it's got fire because it's lit, it's got air, otherwise it wouldn't burn, and it's got water from the vapor or even from the wax. So yeah, we don't have so when we talk about there being a person that's fiery much later on, we're not talking about their only fire. We're talking about that has come out of balance with the rest of them. That all four is present, but one is being pronounced. And it's similar with herbs. Sometimes herbs can be very hard to be put in one camp because they are technically all the elements, but their attributes, the way that they act, can sometimes align themselves with one or maybe two of those elements.
Yeah, that's really good, because fire comes to be more of a property than an actual living, like thing, material thing. We don't think of fire as fire, but as the amount of properties that the fire has. And then you can tell us a little more about what are these properties, what is called fire and why, and what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in terms of how things are attributed to these concepts, because you're like, well, how do you know what's fire and how do you know what's earth? How do you know that this plant is water? They're codified based on their effect, and each of the elements has two qualities that they're called, or properties. So those qualities or properties are hot, cold, dry, and wet or moist. So each of those elements combine two of those, and you'll recognize that there's two qualities that are opposite. So hot is opposite to cold, dry is opposite to moist. So each of them combine those in different ways. So fire, for example, is hot and dry. The water is the complete opposite. It's wet and cold. Air is hot and moist. I'm doing this off the top of my head. And earth is cold and dry. So we then work out, which is what the majority of the work of Culpeper, the great herbalist in the 1700s, did, was what effect does that herb have on the body when taken or when applied. In magic, what we're doing is what effect does that plant have in the magic spiritual world to being what it is. So, for example, if it taken orally and it dries and it heats, then it's going to be aligned to fire. So pepper, ginger, chili pepper. If in magical use, if it gives something energy and drive and courage, then it's aligned with fire. So something like galangal or another derivative of ginger, or pepper.
I'm thinking, what about myrrh and like those resins that are very like...
Myrrh's, yeah, that's a really good one. So myrrh is somewhere between earth and water.
Right.
So the ancient grimoire tradition, the magical tradition, has difficulty with the resins because they've been around for so long. They get attributed to everything. But in modern magical, it will normally be between earth and water, and that is because it is an earthy smell. It's slightly spicy, slightly warm, but it's linked between water and earth reasons. So, for example, it was one of the gifts to Jesus, and it represented the soul. So it's about that kind of soul, that magic, that mysticism. It's linked to death and what's beyond death and that transition. So it's very linked
that is more
with...
watery.
Yeah, exactly.
It's more watery, let's say.
But I mean, death comes with the earthy use as well. So anything to do with death is normally kind of earth because we bury people traditionally.
Yeah, or the ashes and everything that is very earthy.
Yeah. So and then like frankincense will normally be put between air and fire, traditionally, roughly, because it's much more about invigorating spirits, lifting people up, which is an active principle. And it's either seen as air because it's notoriously known for being an incense, frank incense, meaning true incense. Or it's normally fire because it's seen as a blessing or a bountiful thing that kind of blesses.
I like that. This maybe the triad of myrrh, incense, and then it's benzoin.
Yeah, benzoin's a good one. Yeah, benzoin would, for me, that's so watery. So that's an extremely watery one. When you burn benzoin, it's sometimes called gum Benjamin in like the old texts. Yeah, it's almost watery smoke. You can kind of see it thickly, like unguenty, wafting through the room, but it's got a very watery smell. But that's kind of almost like the sensuality of the psychic world and the sensuality of spirits. So it's quite a watery thing.
That's very interesting.
So we codify it based on those properties. What does it do? And then what kind of it is. So that's the reason why we tend to learn the elemental associations to plants quite early on in training is so that we can kind of group things into purposes.
Exactly, how they connect with the body and the energy too.
Yeah. For example... Yeah, do we
can we show maybe, do you have anything that shows fire is hot and dry? And
yeah, I do.
Anyway, we're going to be sharing some information tomorrow. We're going to put that text that Paul read at the beginning and put it in the caption so you can always find the information that we're talking about. Also, always the day after, we share something linked to the class, but something practical, something that you can use and take from this class.
There you go, guys. So as you can see, fire on the top, air, they share the idea of hot. Water is here, they share water, wet. Cold is here, and that's shared with earth. Dry here, that's shared with fire. Yeah. It's not perfect because I quite like using these old-fashioned things from books, but that should kind of help.
Yeah, I like the morphology and the squares. You know, the square upside down, square without a square. It's very very elemental. Yeah. Exactly,
because fours we talk about earth, and funny enough, like in astrology. The earth, actually, I've got it on the slide to here.
It's represented by the square, yeah.
This symbol here, this big circle with the cross, means the planet Earth, because the Earth is governed by 4 elements. Very simply.
Yeah. So I like the symbolism.
There's an another one with the mass active and passive for you guys if you want to copy.
Yeah. That graphic is really good because it's like a graphic, so you can tell that some plants are somewhere in that spectrum. It's like it has spectrums. Some are more dry, more warm, so you can make a little.
And that links us back to how it's used in the 1700s, well, probably slightly earlier. I think Culpeper is about 1600s, 1700s. And Nicholas Culpeper, who was one of the great herbalists of his time, used these in degrees, like you're talking about, like that things are slightly hot or slightly cold. And here we go with that. So this is exactly what you're talking about. This is like 4 degrees. So it can be here, like a little bit wet and a little bit hot, or it could be very wet and very hot. So this is kind of how we plan out certain herbs. But I've also used this for incenses and mixes, funnily enough, like taking each of the ingredients and then plotting the ingredients on here and then seeing whether it skews over to water or skews over to air.
So how to combine maybe to be able to prepare a balanced infusion, let's say,
exactly.
Or a tincture. Yes.
Yeah, and it's sometimes really good for people that are making things like anything that you're doing, like a tea or an incense or an alchemical brew, is you think it's there to increase fire, to kind of make something more fiery or make something more energetic, and then you plot it and you're like, that's not actually that fiery. So it's sometimes quite a nice way of visualizing what you've actually achieved.
Yeah. I also think it's very interesting to know your herbs in that way, in that graphic and in the degrees of each property that they have, because sometimes we go like, this person can't sleep, so I'm going to give them valerian or valeriana, right? Or I'm going to give them lemon balm. Or you go with the plant because of the sleeping properties or the relaxing properties, but you're not thinking that maybe for that specific person, you need to think how the system is working. If their system is too moist, you're going to have to counterbalance with something more dry and vice versa.
Right. There's two different versions. I mean, to take this conversation to a base level, there's 2 different types of diarrhea. You know, there's one that's very fiery.
Specific.
Yeah, it's just the first one that is so obvious to me. So if you've got a kind of a fiery symptom of diarrhea, it's irritated, it's almost explosive, it's because your vitality is working too much, then using a fiery herb is going to exacerbate, or even an air herb is going to exacerbate it.
Yeah, but if you've got at the same time, that person needs energy. So he's going to ask, give me something fiery for my energy.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the clients don't quite know what is best for them.
Exactly. So that's when you have to sort of think and configure your plan for that person. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of how we codify herbs. So let's think of a few herbs for each of the elements, maybe, just to help people.
Yes, that would be.
Would you think that would help?
Yeah.
Okay, so things that are fiery are heating and drying. So especially anything that culinary-wise that does that. So chilies is the big one that I kind of mentioned earlier, pepper, ginger, but also those that are kind of warming and slightly less drying. So, for example, did we decide that Calendula was kind of more over the fire aspect for us, guys?
Calendula.
I can't remember what we decided.
Yeah, maybe if somebody here wants to pitch in with that one, it would be nice to see your opinion or usages, because it has that earthy thing too, with the properties for the body and for the skin and healing and sort of coagulating and all that. But it is, this is when all the parts from the planets come in. So it's a herb that is ruled by the sun. So its planetary signature is sun. So that would be saying that it is fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are many ways to sort of. Oh, cinnamon. That's a good one in the comments.
Cinnamon's a good one. Yeah, nice one. Yeah. Sometimes cinnamon's put under air only because it's sweet. But cassia probably would be more fire because, you know, I'm talking about those degrees. So cassia is normally sold cheaply as cinnamon, but it's not. It's a different tree. But cassia is hotter than cinnamon, and cinnamon is slightly sweeter. So you could put them slightly different. But yeah, I would kind of put it over towards fire. And funny enough, it was the one that I was thinking of to mention, and I was like,
Yeah, thinking about
so yeah, fire or air.
Maybe I don't know, turmeric, if you feel it's more earthy because it's a root.
I think traditionally that's put over to fire. But yeah, so that's another bit, is that the different parts of a plant can be attributed to elements. So that which is under roots are earth, that which is leafy is water. The flowers are more fire. So you can attribute it that way, and they have done in older grimoires.
Yeah, if you think about it, the flowers are sort of the reproduction, and the seed comes from the flower, so that's why it's the fire, because it's the active principle that actually reproduces the plant. So it's related with its function too. But like in the case of turmeric, I thought about it, and I'm thinking about all these plants, because these are spicy plants that sort of start the process of digestion, for example. So they heat up the stomach, they make the stomach produce some juices, and it's good for digestion. So that would be a fiery property. So in that case, turmeric will be.
I think in Ayurvedic you talk about stoking the Agni. As an alchemist we call it the inner Athena. But yeah, the digestive system.
The Agni, the fire is Agni. So and then I was thinking about cardamom, but I think we place
water and earth. Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely put it towards water personally, because it's in magic. It's like love, seduction, and that kind of thing. Because it's the queen of spices. It's just so beautiful. You smell it, and it's put in desserts and sweet things.
But in that case, it's a seed.
It's so water. Yeah, it's a seed. Yeah. So yeah, you could put it towards slightly more earth because of that. So it's interesting. But yeah, so that kind of covers fire. Let's do a few water. Water, cucumber is a very obvious one. It is definitely cold and wet. Any salad herbs are generally over to the water, other than things like rocket. Rocket would be fire. Yeah, lettuce. Lettuce is brilliant because it's a soporific. It helps fall asleep. People relax and fall asleep, which is perfect for water, especially wild lettuce.
Yeah. Everything, watermelon, which is full of water, obviously, and cold and wet.
Yes. Yeah. What else? Radishes are sometimes put over towards water, sometimes put over towards fire historically, just because they are kind of peppery, but they're full of water. Yeah. Conundrum.
Yeah.
So that's a few watery ones. What else have we got? Earth. The most famous one is patchouli. It's a very fragrant one. I always see it as goth perfume from the 1980s. Like, it was the scent of goths in the 1980s. It's heavy patchouli, and it's linked to death, and it's linked to mourning, but also to mediumship, and it's mostly used externally on skin in terms of medical.
It's really good for the skin, for aging skin and like age marks and the first wrinkles. It's really good. It's really moisturizing, and it helps the structure of the skin, actually. Patchouli is, really good.
I used to use it a lot as a teenager, splashing it over my face, and unfortunately smelling like a 1980s goth. But yeah, it's a great one. So that's the traditional, the earth one. Other thing would be comfrey. Comfrey is an interesting plant. It's saturnine, but it has a lot of lead in it naturally, and heavy metals. So the young leaves are edible. You can deep fry them and make them yummy crisps, but the older leaves don't. But that's mostly used for bronchitis type disorders and breathing difficulties, I believe. So comfreys and bruising, it's used for bruising as well and skeletal complaints. So a poultice of comfrey would be used for bruises on legs. So that's a traditional earth herb. Air, what do you reckon?
Air. We've been talking about. I was thinking, about earth. I was thinking of all the vegetables that grow under earth. So like potatoes, sweet potatoes.
Great. Potatoes an interesting one because in Ayurveda they'd see that as watery because it has a watery effect on the body. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because of the starch.
But we would, yeah. In terms of Western, it's definitely
it humidifies the body, so that is true. That if it's in effect, it humidifies because starch will cause sort of moistening of the digestive system. Yeah. And it's the stickiness too. Yeah. Going to air, then I think we put lavender in air.
Lavenders,
Because Beautiful. Of its sort of meditative property to calm the pineal gland, so it's like related with calming the nervous system. I think everything that is related with the nervous system and works in the nervous system could be an air plant.
And mentally, so for example, rosemary works psychologically. It kind of that helps you think. Fennel's another one that's traditionally air. Sometimes put a little bit fiery, but it's definitely an air for me.
I don't know, mint, if you take it more like a watery, but it also helps concentration.
I put it as air.
Air,
So there is an argument for mint being water because it grows near water, and there is also an argument for it being Venus in terms of planetary, which I know we'll do eventually in the future.
That's air. That helps.
But I can't take it. For me, it is air. Because it's about the intellect and the mind, and it's Mercury in plants.
It's Mercury in planets.
For me, it's just I can't do the Venus thing.
Some Venus plants are tricky, like thyme. So thyme is considered Venus for some alchemists, and that is a very strong herb. Well, thyme is an interesting one. That would be a fiery plant, wouldn't it?
I think quite a lot of the Mediterranean herbs are kind of based on fire. I think coriander is as well. Coriander traditionally is seen as fire, which I imagine it's linked to the seed. It makes sense, but the herb to me is a kind of, I suppose it's astringent.
And it's warm too. Like if you drink the thyme tea, it's very, very warm and it's very wintry kind of tea.
Yeah, that's true. And good for the throat.
With mint, I was also saying it's exactly for opening the air passage through the body, so it is very air. So I think. And we said lavender. We said, what about what do you think about camphor? I think camphor is also very.
Well, camphor's an interesting one because it's not it's a product. It's a herbal product because it's a distillate.
No, but the tree.
You're talking about the bark. Oh, okay. Yeah.
The tree, and even in the tree, if you take the leaves and you open and you cut them, they have this beautiful fragrance. Like the tree, I don't know if it would be air or water, but
and that's the argument is that I would place it in air, but traditionally I think it's placed in water.
Yeah, but actually I would place it in air too because it has tremendous effects on the nervous system. In fact, camphor is a really interesting compound of something that they used to sell as a medicine. It was paregoric, the paregoric elixir, and it had camphor.
Yes, that's right.
And
Yeah.
it used to dope people to the
It's one of those fantastic things because normally you kind of get it as a compound, which is what I was talking about, like a product, and it's a distillate. It's a solid distillate. So, like normally you distill it, you'd get an oil. This is a solid crystalline form, so it's white. But yeah, really interestingly, it's one of the very few things that if you use it in incense, it sublimates. It goes straight from solid to air. It just wants to be air. It doesn't melt first into water and then goes into
very volatile
to air. It just goes straight. Yeah, it just goes straight there. So it wants to be air for me. It doesn't want to be water.
Yeah, she says alcanfor. So alcanfor will be the name in Spanish. I think the plant itself is called camphora.
It's Camphor something or other.
But it
Camphor sinensis or something. Yeah.
But camphor is really interesting, and I will put it under air too.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I think that kind of gives you a kind of description. There are some that fall between, and there are sometimes in history they kind of attribute it, and then modern day, like me and Luciana are going, I don't agree. It's kind of a bit more of it, and we do that based on those qualities and what it's used for. So we can have those kind of discussions as herbalists, like kind of going, well, it's used for sleep. Sleep is a watery thing and a soothing thing. So therefore,
emotions, that would be a watery property. So it's important. Maybe some different authors will vary on what is the element that is related to that plant, but the important thing is that us, through our own experience, can work with these plants, and through its effects on the body, we can tell, okay, this is working, this is having an airy sort of effect in my body, or is having a fiery effect in my body. And this is an interesting question that Freya here is asking. She says, I know some people use rocks of alcanfor or camphora to sleep on pillows, for example. Okay, so that is very interesting because this is the resin that Paul was talking about. It's a resin, and it's very usually the camphor that some people also put in their clothes so the moths won't eat them. That is very synthetic, and it's not real camphor. But you can get camphor crystals, but it's a very alchemical process, and they don't do it anymore. So they do it usually the resin that we buy to burn. It's usually artificial. It's not real crystals of camphor, because I have created crystal camphor in my alchemy studies, and it's sublime. It's something out of this world, really. When you really accomplish the crystals, it's beautiful. I have actually a camphor elixir that is made with the whole alchemical process. And it's nothing to do with the thing that you buy. So I wouldn't recommend using the resin in your pillow or anything, because it's just synthetic.
It's just, but it's also very strong. I think people do that just to clear the airways, like you would use in the UK. We've got this kind of thing called Vicks, which is a vapor rub. It's got like eucalyptus oils in it, so I think it's just to help someone breathe through the night and therefore get a more restful sleep.
But it loses the
if you're heading off by
properties. It loses. Oh, did I froze?
Oh no, someone was just saying that they're going, so I was just waiting. Exactly. We are about 10 minutes away from the end, so I'm going to try and pull us back to try and kind of round things off.
I think we can talk about how these relate with the body and the emotions.
Yes, so in the body, this is known as humours. So this is the bit of Galenic medicine that kind of went up to the 1800s, if you can believe it, was this balancing of the elements. So inside the body, they're known as humours. We will talk more about that in the fifth episode on the 28th of May, about humours in the body, the elements in the body. But at the moment, just see that in the body there are different elements. One can take precedence, and that to balance it out, you use the opposite element. So water is opposite to fire. So if you increase water, you decrease fire, and same vice versa. If you increase fire, you decrease water. And then earth and air are opposite. So if you increase air, you decrease earth, and the opposite. That's the nicest, simplest way there is kind of linked between the active elements and the passive elements. But for kind of beginner, do things at home. If you are exhibiting fiery temperaments, like argumentative, snappy, or can't settle down, find it very difficult to relax, then that's too much fire. Balance it with water.
And
if you are having too much...
in the physical, too much fire will be redness, rushes in the skin. The fire is the element that shows more through the skin. Yes,
and then water is putting on weight too much in the body, puffiness, and watery, too much sweat. And in the psyche, it's about being too sleepy, too tired, too fatigued.
Depression, inertia, this kind of...
fantasy, being too fantasy and being too daydreamy. And then you balance that out with fire. Then air is quick, talkative, kind of a bit me. I'm a little bit of an air personality, so I talk quite fast. To balance that out, I'd use earth. What is it in the body? A
lot of concepts.
Yeah. Normally quite thin, wiry people.
True. Long and skinny. Yeah, we'll be talking.
I wish. Post lockdown, definitely not.
Yeah, well, that is when we talk about Ayurveda, it's going to be very funny because we're going to be talking about these biotypes, and it's kind of a rule almost that all the blondes are pittas. So first is pitta, and then we'll talk about this.
And pitta kapha.
There you go. Yeah. So maybe because that is the interesting thing, that there could be some elements linked to your body type, but then in your mind you can express other elements.
Because we are bits of everything. Yeah, because we're bits of everything. We don't have pure elements. And just to end that, earth is about being too solid, being too rigid. So having very fixed beliefs and fixed ideas, structure. Yeah. Once again, normally being kind of having squarish bodies and kind of low down to the ground. What else?
The capacity of going slow, not reacting, but going at your own pace. Taking life at your own pace. Order.
Exactly, and that is balanced by using air. So for the handout tomorrow, that will be live on both of our pages. We've created some special teas for each of those 4 elements that you guys can make at home. They're all safe ingredients, but it is at your own risk. I have to say that for legal reasons. Experimental. To balance those out. So if you are experiencing too much fire, you then use the water tea. And you just put them in boiling water and steep. Feel free if you wanted to create a decoction, which is putting it in and boiling it for a stronger tea. But play around with them. So those are coming out on our Instagrams tomorrow.
Yeah, and we would love if you are starting to use these teas and you have questions, you can publish a comment in the image that we're posting tomorrow and go like, okay, so this that I'm experiencing, is it fiery? Yes. So should I try the watery tea? Yes. So since we talked really fast about this, because we're going to talk a lot more about the effects on the body, the effects of each element in the body in the 5th session, like Paul said. But then in the next session, which is the 30th of April, so it's not next Friday, but the next one, we're going to be introducing now the elements in alchemy and how we work with the elements in alchemy. What are the laboratory processes that represent air, water, fire, and earth? Which elements? And then we're going to talk about the alchemical elements per se, which is what alchemy, the constitution of all things. In the cosmovision of alchemy. So that's going to be very interesting for those of you who are interested in getting into the world of alchemy. And yeah, feel free to ask us everything that you need on our posts. We are there. Paul and I are there to interact and answer your questions. And the idea is that you start approaching the plants, using the plants, making your teas. If you're going to start using a tea, don't drink it just once. Maybe drink a couple cups every day for at least a month and see what happens. So
exactly.
Experiment. The idea is that you can start experimenting with plants.
So have fun with those guys, and please feel free to when they posted, comment, ask questions, suggest alternatives. We're always happy with alternatives to our recipes and ideas.
Yeah, and I remember something else. Next time, don't miss it, because we're going to do a practice. We're going to do a practice of meditation, alchemical meditation with breath work and everything. So it's going to be really nice. We're going to be talking a little bit, and then we're going to go straight to the practice so we can pass it through the body.
It's going to be great. Okay, wonderful. Well, lovely seeing you, Luciana. Lovely speaking with you about herbalism and the occult world, as always.
Always a pleasure. Yeah, thank you very much for joining.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Enjoy your weekends. Please feel free to message or just play around with plants and look at alchemy and elements.
Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you, Paul, and thanks, Luciana, for this new life. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Ta-ra.
Bye.